made my head really big on the screen. Not
Are we awake? Oh, wonderful. Okay. Gur Geva, before I start the chat and begin with a list of questions I have, the 3 W's. Who is Iidentifii? What do you do? Why did you start Iidentifii? Let's dive right into it.
Yeah, no small talk. Thanks for having us. It's a proper great conference. It's nice to be on this side because it's a super bright screen, so it's nice to actually see everybody else. Iidentifii is Africa's leading face authentication business. We focus on onboarding retail bank individuals to the bank and then subsequently authenticating them. So we identify individual, hence the name. And who am I? So I'm the founder and lucky to be the CEO of the business. And why did we start? We started, it's quite a story, I've told it a couple of hundred times, but I always enjoy sharing it. So if anybody's heard it, you can heckle and stop me. But we started the business about 5 years ago. My eldest daughter, Sophie, is now 6. And at the time, 5 years ago, she was 1 year old. And my wife and I were living in a very small apartment in Cape Town. We just moved from Joburg to Cape Town. And we were a sort of 80 square meter apartment with a lot of furniture on the bottom floor. And my daughter, Sophie, at the age of 1, hadn't learned to walk yet. And my wife's a pediatrician and is pretty A-type personality like me, and was quite concerned that Sophie hadn't learned to walk by the age of 1. And so promptly started to send me all these Property 24 links of 4-bedroom houses with 4 bathrooms en suites and massive gardens. So Sophie could learn to walk, of course, but they were all like 20 million rand. And so I said to my wife, nice try. I'm sure there's another way to teach Sophie to walk. So I took her down to the, I can hear a lot of wives laughing. And like, oh, I know that Property 24 trick. So we didn't buy a house for 20 million, but I took her down the road. I took Sophie down the road to the Greenpoint Park. Has anyone been to the Greenpoint Park in Cape Town? It's a beautiful park. It's probably one of the flagship parks in Cape Town. And from 6:30 a.m. to 7:30 a.m. every single morning for about 6 weeks, I taught Sophie to walk. Held her hands, little feet on the grass, all the night runners in the morning and a really positive energy. And then 6 weeks later, she was walking. And it was a really beautiful moment and a beautiful memory. And about 2 months later, I was telling a very close friend of mine, I told her the story I told you. And she said, well, we had a very different experience in the Greenpoint Park. So I said, oh, what happened? So she said, our nanny was pushing our Baba, our toddler, who was asleep in the pram in the Greenpoint Park when a gentleman approached with 40,000 rand cash in a Virgin Active tog bag and said, if you take the tog bag and go left, I'll take the pram and go right. Yeah, and that was my reaction. My reaction was, what? Where? And I did like a triple take on Greenpoint Park. First of all, that it happened at Greenpoint Park, but second of all, that I think we're all accustomed, I'm also ex-Joburger, but you can steal my laptop, steal my phone, worst case scenario, you can hijack me, just let me be safe. But to steal a child, I'd never heard of. And I was like, why would someone steal a child? Like, what's that? Like, what's the upside even? So depraved. But as shocking as it is, for 40,000 rand, you can, I don't even know what the phrase is, but you can obtain a human child in South Africa and sell a child in Europe for R1 million through a backstreet adoption process. And the people in Europe don't know that they think they're adopting an orphan. Now you've got R1 million you need to wash. So where do you wash it? You wash it in the banking system. And when you're washing that money, you're definitely not washing it under your own name. And that's when it hit me. I was like, human trafficking, money laundering, identity theft. And at the same time, the banks at the time were asking for simply like a proof of residence and an ID doc. And there was no biometric verification. Who's on the other side of this email? And that was, you know, we'd done a couple of businesses, some succeeded, some failed. It was the first time I was like, this is a problem to solve. And we got deeply passionate about identity theft and stopping it. And our mission is to stop identity theft in Africa. And we promised ourselves if we couldn't do it properly, we wouldn't do it at all. And we've been fortunate enough to get to do it properly.
Oh, wow. Look, I'm actually an emotional person, so I could just let go of these questions and continue to ask you a lot of questions, but that is bad. It's the silver lining is something good out of that was born. So, congratulations. And all right, so I'm just going to move on to the next questions. What do you think banks actually need to focus on refining their approach to digital identity and security? I know that to avoid fraudulent activities and so on and so forth, but what specifically are you and Iidentifii doing, and why do you think it's important?
I think just referencing Bradwin's, he had an incredible presentation, incredible graphics as well, and one of them was the toddler, with ChatGPT as this toddler. Remote biometric identification in South Africa is about 5 years old. So it's very young. The banks had to transform very quickly. COVID, no one's going to branches. Branches became expensive. Digital transformation became hyper-speed. Other banks were doing it, so there was a real pace that was set to move and get digital transformation in, get remote authentication in, and there wasn't necessarily all the time to fully understand at scale how to implement these security processes. So that was the one reason, and it's the second reason is, like, as much as we sit in these conferences, as much as we have engineering teams, as much as we have leadership teams, these money laundering organizations have hardcore engineers. They probably earn way more than they earn in our businesses, and they probably have ESOPs, and they probably have incentive programs, and it's a virus and a vaccine. So when we originally started, there was no face authentication. And then the bank said, okay, hold on, now take a selfie of yourself. But that selfie was a static selfie. So then identity attacker said, okay, we'll take a picture of Gur off LinkedIn. And then the bank said, oh, now let's check if Gur is alive. Make him wink and blink. That was gesture-based liveness. Then identity attackers said, oh, okay, nice try. So they took Gur's image off LinkedIn, used crazy talk or real illusion, $49, and made me wink and blink. Then the bank said, oh, we now need to prove it's three-dimensional, not just a screen. So now we have to take a video stream and analyze Gur's face and his background to confirm he's three-dimensional. Oh, now we're going to hack that digital stream and play it back to the bank, and so it goes. So the pressures on the bank is to constantly iterate, and that's the nature of cybersecurity, while competing with each other for customer base, while transforming digitally, without a branch network, under COVID speed, with 400 million Africans, not even unbanked, but unidentified. So I think those are the reasons that put a lot of pressure on the banks and generally on financial institutions.
Beautiful. Okay. Now, how can biometric authentication strengthen the security of banking transactions, to protect against fraudulent activity? I know that you said, how you mentioned the banks have to keep evolving and, working on their toes all the time to make sure that they're thinking one step ahead of the hacker. But how do you think biometric authentication, helps evade this?
So I think the basic premise of identification is, how's it? I know something about you, right? So if I say to you, how do I know that it's Mo? I say, Mo, what's your birthday? You tell me. I say, perhaps, what's your wife's maiden name? What's your first car? What's your favorite color? How tall are you? So knowledge is something that I know, something that I have, and then something that I am. Something that I know are those knowledge-based questions. Something that I have is my mobile device or my laptop, and something that I am is my biometric. So that's a three-pronged approach. Start with something that I know. Everybody in this room, when they say if you get nervous on stage, just remember that everybody's data is on the dark web. That's where, it used to be imagine everybody's naked. Now you can just imagine that we're all our data has been breached and you get relaxed. Everybody's data is acquirable on the internet for about $200-300, including your documents, including your proof of residence docs. My brother was hacked. his original email, his original ID doc, original proof of address from an email that wasn't his. But it was very, very close to his original email. So something that you know, something that you have, your device is authenticating you, and then something that you are is your biometric, right? Now the problem is, something that you know, that data breach is happening. Something that you have can now be emulated with Android emulators, and you can get unauthorized access to a device. If you think of a finance department and you've got a sort of a aberrant employee that gives the CFO a coffee with a laxative, the CFO disappears, and then the accountant goes and releases payroll to the wrong people. Now it looks like it's coming from the CFO's laptop and not. And so the only time that you can truly say who is behind this transaction is biometrically. So that's the power of biometric authentication, is a one-to-one match, irrefutable, of who was behind this transaction.
Okay, so something like facial liveness would be preferred in this case.
They're multimodal, right? So there's face authentication, there's voice authentication, there's finger authentication, there's retina, there's iris. The reason that we started with face is if you look at South Africa's environment, you have the face on the identity document, you have the face, luckily, in the government authority, so you could do a selfie to an ID doc, or you can't do a voice selfie to an ID doc, so you can't enroll. You can subsequently authenticate with voice, so once you're enrolled. But, I mean, as you guys have all read, the voice synthesis software now can create a voice in 3 to 4 seconds. So I'm speaking now, someone in the audience is recording, you pay, again, $39, or you go to Microsoft Valley, and you've got a voice for authentication. So there was a journalist from Vice. He took his own voice, he used Microsoft to emulate and synthesize his own voice, and used his own voice to log into his own account. So he wasn't performing identity theft, but he was proving a point. And that's why voice has now become a challenge. It was a brilliant complement to face, but now voice is challenged. And to take a picture of your finger from a remote device is harder because of the quality of how much fingerprint you need to analyze before sending. So the face is a great tool.
So facial liveness is a preferred mode then?
In this environment, yeah, in this environment and across Africa. But I think what we need across Africa is what we have here is a face database in the government that we can reference, because the document is easily forged, and that's part of the challenge in African countries without a government face database.
Okay, so I, of course, know quite a lot about your organization. I've done my reading up. Help me understand, what is Iidentifii? You know, tell us a little about your solutions.
So we're the best.
Of course.
I say this, and I say it sincerely, the competitors that we have in the market are our allies. And I think that's a big change. I think 5 or 6 years ago, the banks we were talking to weren't sharing information. And I was sitting with the head of fraud of a tier 1 bank, and I was like, why aren't you telling your neighbor down the road? He's like, no, I want to build my fence higher. That was happening 5 years ago. So the competition is on the other side of the fence. The competition are the money launderers, and that's our competition. And so where we connect with all the players in the market is we want to be able to onboard any person from any device with true, scalable proof that it is who they are within 30 seconds. And we want to know that it's appropriate to Africa. African faces are very diverse, and traditionally the US algorithms and European algorithms weren't fit for purpose. So we need to partner with companies that focus on that, and we need to partner with entities that understand the importance of how sophisticated the biometric attacks are. The ability to take an onboarding, that 2.5-second video stream, and hack it and replay it from Monday, Wednesday to Friday is a very unique attack and a scalable attack. So what we focus on is helping banks onboard any person from any device in under 30 seconds and do step-up authentication. So if someone loses their device, rebind your face to that device. You lose your PIN and password, rebind. You do a SIM card swap, and there's a lot of SIM card swap fraud in Africa. How do you bind the face to So if ever you need to make sure the person on the other side of the device is who they say they are without specialized hardware, that's our focus area.
Okay, so 5 years ago, like you mentioned, a tier one bank would not share their data with you. Even today, in case of implementing biometric solutions with banks, tell me what are the main challenges you think the banks are facing, and what can be done to address this and make sure that most of them are using biometric solution providers?
The challenges that we've seen is it's incredibly difficult to shop for a biometric solution from an RFP. It's going to sound like a strange thing, but who's ever bought a car online? Has no one bought a car online? Well, I'm saying just reviewed. You've gone to Honest John or Cars.coza and reviewed a Mercedes C-Class for a BMW 3 and then gone to buy it. Have you done online research on a car? Right. So same engine capacity, same fuel consumption, 5-seater, 4 doors, all of it looks the same. And then you go and drive it and you realize that, for me in my case, that my head hits the roof. But they don't tell you that in the review because they don't really understand your environment. Or you realize that your stroller doesn't fit in the boot, or your golf clubs don't fit in the boot. To test drive a biometric solution is incredibly hard, because to test drive how accurate a solution is at authenticating 50 million black faces or African faces taken from a selfie of a mobile phone, banks don't have that data. To be able to ethically hack at an incredibly high level a solution, banks don't have that knowledge. To be able to understand that the solution architecture you deploy now is not going to scale in 3 years once you've onboarded 6 million people, those are the challenges. And I guess the question, the invitation that I have is, don't believe the spreadsheet that gives you a weighted average answer that says this is the solution provider that gives you 8.6 versus 8.4. Run them in tandem. And what we're seeing now a lot is that institutions are taking the top two or three providers and running them in tandem and watching when it breaks, and when it breaks, failing over and having redundancy, because certain solutions have airbags and others don't, and you'll only find out 3% of the time. But when you find out, it's not a jaw, as we say in South Africa.
So trial and error would be the best option.
And parallel split tests and redundancy and proof of concepts at scale. Those were.
Wonderful. Now, just before we wrap, I want to understand. I've heard, everything.
When you say rap, you mean hip hop. Because this wasn't.
I'm very bad at it. Okay, so a success story with Iidentifii, something that you really cherish, the work that you're proud of.
I think. It's weird to sit here 5 years later speaking to an audience. When we started, I'm a CA, I knew nothing about tech, actually, and I knew nothing about biometrics. All I knew from testing is that you could forge the Green Book identity document very easily, and everybody who was selling to Standard Bank was selling them that answer. But we went to Standard Bank, here in Baker Street. We went up to the 6th or 7th floor. There was that huge table, a whole about 12 people just like yourselves, mostly with Apple iPads and pencils, super bright. And they said, look, we've gone around the world, we've looked at 60 entities, we've done 6 POCs, you're very late to the party, what's your story, why should we believe you? And I said, every one of them is telling the Green Book document forgery can be detected. And they were like, and I'm like, that's not true, and I can prove it to you. And they're like, that's when the Apple pencils came down. And I was like, well, what do we need to do? Like, how would you solve it? I was like, get the image from the DHA. That's your reference image. That's the only way. For us, the greatest success story was co-creating with Standard Bank an enterprise-grade solution where the solution architects, MZ and Stanton, would baking us under immense pressure to build something that now 9 million retail customers in Standard Bank strongly authenticate with DigiMe. And it was that, it's like a true partnership where you say, what do you really need? Like, let me make you a tailor-made suit to your environment, to your customers, to your handset types. You need to reverse bill. Your megabyte size in the Apple store has to be sub 6 megabytes. I get it. It's that. that is the greatest, I guess, the greatest joy of
Oh,
partnership.
that's wonderful. Indeed, it is. I mean, if you're working with Standard Bank with 9 million customer base, well, thank you so much, Gur. I think I have done with all my questions, unless you want to share something else, or you want to begin wrapping.
No, just to thank you guys. I think I think Colleen, our head of marketing, was like, "Gur, I don't know actually which conference to send you anymore. I've got 4 calls a day." And she chose this, and I'm glad that we were here. We had 4 other conferences in Kenya, and this is intimate, it's focused, and there's a lot of high quality content individuals. So just thank you and well done.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you.
Another round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you kindly.